A modest woman faces humiliation while making a deposit, treated like an outsider at a prestigious bank. The manager points and demands she leave, but when her billionaire husband intervenes, the entire bank is stunned, forever altering their judgment of others. The gleaming marble floors of Atlantic National Bank sparkled under the morning sun as Sarah Morgan neared the entrance. At 34, clad in simple gray sweatpants and a plain t-shirt, she moved with quiet poise despite her casual outfit. Her husband, Daniel Morgan, accompanied her, his tailored navy suit and understated platinum watch signaling considerable wealth. At 42, he had built Morgan Capital Partners into one of the country's top investment firms, though he wore his success with modesty. "Are you sure you want to do this alone?" Daniel asked, checking his watch. "Absolutely," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand. "I've always handled the foundation's affairs solo. That was our deal." Their bond was rooted in deep respect. Despite access to limitless wealth, Sarah lived simply, pouring herself into her foundation for underprivileged children. "I'll take that Singapore call in the lobby while you get started," Daniel said. "Won't take long." They entered together, drawing mixed reactions. Employees straightened at Daniel's polished appearance, while Sarah's casual look prompted confused glances. Today was different. The foundation usually used electronic transfers, but a new educational program required a separate account with paperwork needing in-person attention. As Sarah approached customer service, Daniel moved aside, his voice fading as he discussed investments with his Asia team. The sunlight glinted off Sarah's simple wedding band as she reached Rebecca Palmer's desk. Rebecca, the customer service manager, presented a polished image with her neatly styled blonde hair and crisp blouse, but the tension in her eyes betrayed inner turmoil. Neither woman knew this simple transaction would soon become an unforgettable lesson in assumptions and consequences. Rebecca Palmer's morning had been rough. The promotion she tirelessly pursued had gone to someone from another branch. Though her flawless makeup hid the redness from crying, her brittle smile gave her away. When she spotted Sarah in sweatpants and a t-shirt, she immediately judged her as out of place. Atlantic National wasn't just any bank, it catered to Boston's elite. "Good morning," Sarah said warmly. "I'd like to make a deposit and open a new account, please." Rebecca's smile was tight. "Do you currently bank with us?" Her tone hinted at skepticism. "No, this would be a new account," Sarah said, placing a folder with a large check on the desk. "It's for the Morgan Educational Foundation. We're launching a new program." Rebecca glanced at the check, her eyebrows lifting slightly at the six-figure amount. Her attitude shifted from dismissive to wary. "That's a significant deposit," she said, not reaching for the check. "May I ask where these funds are from?" "The foundation raised them at our annual benefit," Sarah explained. "All supporting documentation is here, including our 501(c)(3) certification." Nearby customers began noticing. Rebecca's voice had a sharpness that carried. "I'm sorry, but we usually don't open accounts of this size without thorough verification," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding about our standards." Sarah remained composed, though a slight flush colored her cheeks. "Our CFO called ahead to confirm. Everything required is in this folder," she said. Rebecca's smile grew tighter. "Ms. Morgan?" she asked pointedly. "Atlantic National serves a particular clientele. Our high net worth clients expect a certain standard." She gestured vaguely at Sarah's clothing. "I'm not convinced this is the right institution for someone of your profile." The words landed like a slap. Transactions around them paused. A young associate glanced between them, unsure whether to intervene. "Is there an issue with my paperwork?" Sarah asked, voice low but firm. Rebecca's stare hardened. "Let's be honest," she said. "This check is for $250,000. People managing sums like that typically don't show up looking like they just left the gym. It raises concerns." Sarah's eyes widened. "The Morgan Educational Foundation is completely legitimate. We've operated for 5 years and helped over 10,000 children." Rebecca leaned in, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that carried clearly. "Perhaps you'd be better off at a different institution," she said. "An institution more familiar with handling your kind of clientele might suit you better," she said. "I'd hate for us to escalate this situation." The threat was thinly veiled. Several customers were now openly watching, some with disapproval, others with the fascinated curiosity reserved for public humiliation. "Are you refusing to accept this deposit?" Sarah asked, struggling to stay composed. Rebecca raised her finger, pointing directly at Sarah in a dismissive gesture. I'm suggesting you take your business elsewhere before I have to call security. We take financial irregularities very seriously at Atlantic National. The accusation hung heavy in the air. Sarah stood frozen, the blood draining from her face, painfully aware of the spectators. Across the lobby, Daniel Morgan ended his call, his expression darkening as he absorbed the unfolding scene. If you find stories of justice and unexpected truth powerful, hit that subscribe button now. Our channel delivers inspiring tales that just might shift your view of the world. Daniel cut his call short, sensing trouble across the lobby. Even from a distance, Sarah's stiff posture and flushed cheeks told him all he needed to know. The blonde bank manager leaned forward, her finger still aimed at his wife in blatant dismissal. Daniel watched for a moment, his calm, calculating patience, the same that made him a business legend, taking over. His gaze narrowed at the sight of Sarah being publicly shamed, the woman who had dedicated her life to helping disadvantaged children, who chose simplicity over luxury despite their fortune. Crossing the marble floor with steady, deliberate steps, Daniel's mere presence caused subtle waves. A security guard straightened his stance, a young associate did a double take. Fragments of Rebecca's dismissive words reached Daniel's ears as he closed in. Not really the type of client this bank caters to. I suggest you take your so-called charitable donations elsewhere. Sarah spotted Daniel approaching, relief softening her tense expression. Rebecca, too absorbed in her performance, remained unaware. Is there a problem here? Daniel asked, his voice soft but resonating with unmistakable authority. Rebecca turned, annoyance flashing across her face, until her gaze landed on Daniel's expertly tailored suit, his subtle platinum watch, and the unmistakable aura of real power. Her irritation faltered mid-expression. Rebecca stammered, forcing a brittle customer service smile. Sir, I'm assisting this person. Perhaps another associate can help you. Daniel remained impassive, stepping closer to Sarah and resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I believe you're assisting my wife, he said. The words dropped like a thunderclap, silencing the room. Rebecca's face underwent a visible transformation, confusion, realization, then sheer horror as the pieces clicked into place. Your wife, she echoed, her voice suddenly pitched higher. Yes, Daniel confirmed. Sarah Morgan, founder of the Morgan Educational Foundation. He gestured at the check still sitting on the desk. I believe she's here to deposit funds for our new literacy initiative. Rebecca's face drained of color as her eyes darted between Sarah's casual clothes and Daniel's polished presence, her world shifting sickeningly fast. The young associate, sensing disaster, edged backward, distancing himself from the unfolding catastrophe. Mr. Morgan, Rebecca faltered, finally recognizing the gravity of the situation. Daniel Morgan. Morgan Capital Partners, she said, realization washing over her. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Has there? Daniel asked, his voice polite but edged with steel, causing more heads to turn. From my vantage point, it appeared my wife was publicly shamed for failing your personal dress code expectations. Rebecca's hands fluttered, desperate. Sir, I was merely following protocol for substantial deposits. By accusing her of fraud. Daniel interjected, his voice even but cutting, carrying easily across the hushed bank lobby. By threatening her with security? That's your standard protocol at Atlantic National. The scene had drawn attention throughout the bank sharpened. From his office overlooking the main floor, Walter Thompson, the bank's president, noticed the growing crowd. His eyes narrowed when he recognized Daniel Morgan, not just a client, but one whose personal and business accounts represented over $300 million in deposits and investments. Mr. Morgan, please, Rebecca begged, her professional facade crumbling. If I had known who Mrs. Morgan was. And that's exactly the problem, Sarah interrupted, her quiet dignity returning. The issue isn't how you treated me personally, it's that you believe respect should be conditional on perceived wealth or status. Daniel nodded. The irony being that my wife could have arrived flashing designer brands. She chooses not to because she believes character outweighs appearances. A ripple moved through the gathering spectators, several nodding in silent agreement. What's happening here? An authoritative voice cut through the tension as Walter Thompson approached, his expression shifting from concern to recognition. Mr. Morgan, what a surprise, Walter said. Daniel gave a slight nod. I wish I could say the same. Unfortunately, my wife has just endured treatment that is hard to reconcile with our 15-year banking relationship. Thompson's gaze flicked between Sarah, Daniel, and Rebecca, whose face had taken on a ghostly pallor. His stern look made it clear that this incident would have long-reaching consequences, changing not just one career, but potentially the culture of an entire institution. The glass walls of Thompson's office did nothing to contain the intensity building inside. Rebecca Palmer stood rigid, projecting dignity that belied the trembling of her clasped hands. Thompson's typically measured gestures turned emphatic, his words punctuated by unmistakable gravity. Across the bank, conversations muted as discreet glances tracked the unfolding confrontation. Meanwhile, Thomas, the young associate whose earlier discomfort had been visible during Sarah's humiliation, stepped forward with quiet resolve. "Mrs. Morgan, if you'll allow me, I'd be honored to assist with setting up your foundation's account," he offered, his voice respectful in stark contrast to Rebecca's earlier disdain. As Thomas carefully processed the paperwork, he hesitated, then added, "Your literacy program helped my younger sister last year. She struggled with reading until she found your foundation's resources." Sarah's expression softened warmly. "What's her name?" she asked. "Lee," he answered, pride warming his tone. "She read an entire book last month. My parents cried with joy." Before Sarah could reply, the door to Thompson's office swung open. Rebecca emerged first, her composure visibly strained, professional restraint barely masking the emotion in her reddened eyes. Thompson followed, his face etched with the burden of a man confronting systemic failure, not just an employee's mistake. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan," he said, gesturing to a private conference room adorned with tasteful art depicting Boston's historic financial district, "I would appreciate a moment of your time. Thomas, please prioritize the foundation's paperwork," he added over his shoulder. Once the heavy mahogany door closed behind them, Thompson took a deliberate breath. "First, please accept my deepest personal apology for what occurred today," he began. "This incident reveals more than a lapse in individual judgment, it exposes a cultural blind spot within our institution." Daniel's expression stayed composed, the steady calm of a man used to steering high-stakes negotiations. "Walter, over 15 years, Morgan Capital has directed more than 30 high-value clients here, accounting for nearly $1 billion in assets," he said. "I am fully aware," Thompson acknowledged gravely, the weight of those figures thick in his voice. "Then you realize this issue extends far beyond today," Daniel continued. "Sarah wasn't mistreated because she's my wife, she was mistreated because she didn't match someone's narrow vision of who belongs in these marble halls. How many others have suffered silently?" Sarah leaned forward, her quiet tone carrying the kind of strength that commanded full attention. "Mr. Thompson, I'm less concerned with apologies than with genuine change. What happens tomorrow when another person walks in wearing simple clothes, carrying their life savings, or a community's dreams?" Thompson regarded her with new respect, recognizing the insight and leadership Rebecca had failed to see. "What would you propose?" he asked Sarah directly, a subtle but significant acknowledgement that did not go unnoticed by Daniel, whose features softened slightly. "Institute comprehensive bias training for every staff member," Sarah said without hesitation. "Establish clear policies requiring respect, regardless of appearance or account size. And partner with our foundation to create pathways for students from underserved communities into financial services careers." Thompson's expression reflected genuine thought rather than mere appeasement. "And Ms. Palmer?" Daniel asked, his tone making it clear this was not a peripheral concern. "She has been removed from all client-facing roles effective immediately," Thompson replied. "Her future at Atlantic National will depend on whether she demonstrates a genuine understanding of why her actions were fundamentally unacceptable." A knock interrupted them. Thomas entered, carrying the completed paperwork, his posture reflecting both professionalism and purpose. "Everything has been processed according to the Foundation's specifications," he reported. Then, after a brief hesitation, he added, "Mr. Thompson, I believe you should know, Mrs. Morgan's foundation provided the literacy program that changed my sister's life. Without their help, she might have become another statistic, another child lost in a system that doesn't fit every learner." As Thomas departed, Thompson's expression shifted. Abstract concepts of community service solidified into the tangible reality of a single child's reclaimed future. A transformation from numbers on a donation check to a life rewritten. "I believe we have an opportunity here," Thompson said thoughtfully. "Not just to address a wrong, but to create something lasting from this moment." Daniel's guarded expression invited further elaboration without offering commitment. "In addition to implementing Mrs. Morgan's recommendations," Thompson continued, "I propose establishing a dedicated community banking initiative, one designed to serve non-profit organizations and community development efforts. with special attention to removing barriers that discourage or exclude worthy causes seeking financial partnership. Sarah studied him carefully, the same measured discernment that had shaped her foundation's growth. "This cannot be about charity or public relations," she said quietly. "I understand that now," Thompson replied, unexpected humility tempering his executive confidence. "It must be about recognizing inherent dignity, and dismantling barriers that should never have existed in the first place." Out in the lobby, a quieter reckoning unfolded. Rebecca Palmer gathered her belongings, her movements mechanical as she processed the cascading consequences of what she had once dismissed as routine judgment. As she neared the exit, she paused briefly by Thomas's desk. "Your sister," she said, her voice barely above the ambient noise. "She wrote that essay in the Boston Chronicle about overcoming reading challenges, didn't she?" Thomas looked up, surprise evident. "Yes. How did you know?" Rebecca swallowed visibly. "My son struggles with reading too. I kept that article." The admission cost her something, a visible crack in the polished facade she had worn so carefully. As the Morgans emerged from the conference room, the atmosphere of the bank had transformed. The earlier spectacle of humiliation had been replaced by something more complex, a collective recognition that systems built on surface judgments diminish everyone they touch. Rebecca stood uncertainly near the exit, torn between the urge to leave and a deeper need for resolution. After a moment's reflection, Sarah approached her. "Mrs. Morgan," Rebecca began, her voice scarcely audible. "I can't undo what happened." "No, you can't," Sarah agreed, her tone firm but free of the vindictiveness Rebecca clearly expected. "But I understand you have a son who struggles with reading." Rebecca's startled expression confirmed that Thomas had shared this private detail. "Our foundation is hosting a workshop next Thursday for parents of children with learning differences," Sarah continued, retrieving a business card from her purse. "You should come." Rebecca accepted the card with trembling fingers. Sarah added quietly, "Sometimes we judge others harshly because we're fighting battles no one else can see. Your son deserves every chance to thrive, no matter how he learns." As the Morgans departed, the whispers that followed them were not of scandal or confrontation. They spoke instead of something deeper. The realization that true wealth is measured not by possessions or appearances, but by how we treat those we think can offer us nothing in return. Daniel squeezed Sarah's hand as they crossed the marble floor toward their car. "After everything she put you through, you still offered her son help," he said quietly. "That's why I fell in love with you 15 years ago. And why I fall in love with you all over again, every single day." Sarah smiled, the setting sun casting a warm glow over them as they stepped into the evening, leaving behind not just a resolved conflict, but the beginning of a better legacy. Simple gesture illuminating her face with a radiance no designer outfit could ever bestow. "Everyone deserves the chance to become better than their worst moment," she replied. "Sometimes transformation begins precisely when our certainties have been most thoroughly shattered." As they drove away, Atlantic National Bank stood at the threshold of its own transformation. One that would ripple outward in ways no one could yet imagine, touching lives far beyond its imposing marble walls. 6 months later, Sarah stood before a diverse audience, her simple elegance unchanged despite the national recognition her foundation had recently received. Real change, she addressed the gathering of educators, parents, and financial professionals, happens when opportunity meets accountability. The Atlantic National Community Banking Initiative had launched just 8 weeks earlier, with Thomas Chen now serving as Community Outreach Director, guiding its growth with the same quiet determination he had shown that day on the bank floor. Already, the program had established financial partnerships with 27 community organizations, groups previously overlooked by traditional banking practices. Walter Thompson sat in the front row, his transformation from conventional bank president to advocate for institutional reform visible in his attentive, open posture. Beside him sat Daniel, pride illuminating his features as he watched Sarah articulate the vision they had helped bring to life. And 3 rows back, less conspicuous but equally engaged, sat Rebecca Palmer. The months since that fateful day had changed her visibly. After attending her first parent workshop, she had become steadily involved with the foundation, eventually emerging as a strong advocate for families navigating learning differences. "The simple path," Sarah continued, "is to assess worth by appearances, clothing, possessions, account balances. The meaningful path requires recognizing the dignity inherent in every person, regardless of external markers." Behind her, the presentation screens displayed vibrant images. Community initiatives now flourishing with proper financial support. Educational programs, neighborhood revitalization projects, senior services. All once excluded, now empowered through inclusive banking partnerships. After the presentation, Rebecca approached Sarah, a folder clutched in her hands. "My son's latest assessment," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. She opened it, revealing dramatic improvements in his reading metrics. "The techniques your foundation recommended changed everything for him," she said quietly. Rebecca hesitated, her fingers tightening briefly on the folder before adding, "I think about that day at the bank constantly. How quickly I judged you. How easily I dismissed you." She met Sarah's gaze directly for the first time, the weight of the past suspended between them. "And now?" Sarah prompted gently. "Now," Rebecca said, voice thick with emotion. "I understand I was the one who didn't belong that day. Not because of how I looked, but because of how I saw others. How I behaved." Rebecca's smile carried both regret and hope. "I'm grateful my lowest moment became my turning point." Across the room, Thompson was engaged in earnest conversation with Daniel. "The initiative has exceeded every projection," Thompson reported, "not just in community goodwill, but in solid business growth. It turns out serving underrepresented communities creates sustainable value." Daniel nodded, a quiet smile on his face. "The most effective solutions don't come from being designed for profit. They come from addressing authentic needs that have gone unmet." As evening descended, Sarah and Daniel walked through the community garden that had been the foundation's first project years ago. Now flourishing with fall vegetables, it stood as a living testament that meaningful change begins with small, consistent efforts. "What strikes me most," Sarah reflected, her breath visible in the cool evening air, "is that Rebecca has become one of our most effective advocates. Our harshest critics truly can become our strongest allies when given the opportunity to see differently." Daniel wrapped an arm around her shoulders, smiling as he looked at her. "That's because you didn't simply want justice that day. You wanted transformation." Sarah leaned into his embrace, watching as garden lights illuminated the pathways between carefully tended plots. "The work continues," she said softly. "But every time I see a parent like Rebecca advocating for their child, or a banker like Thomas creating pathways where none existed before, I'm reminded that change is possible. One person at a time. One assumption challenged at a time," Daniel affirmed with quiet confidence. Sarah smiled, her voice steady with quiet conviction. "Exactly." Together, they walked on, two people whose power to influence systems came not primarily from their financial resources, but from their unwavering belief that every person deserves to be seen, valued, and respected, regardless of the clothes they wear or the assumptions others might make about their worth. "If this story touched your heart," the voiceover began, soft and inviting, "remember that every day presents opportunities to look beyond appearances and recognize the dignity in those around us. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge perspectives and inspire positive change." "Where are you watching from?" the voice continued, a call to engagement. Let us know in the comments below and share a time when you experienced or witnessed judgment based on appearances. Until next time, remember that true wealth isn't measured by what we possess, but by how we treat others, especially those who can offer us nothing in return.